And if tragedy strikes...
I'd walked into the grocery store on a Saturday morning and picked up the newspaper and found her picture on the cover. Just my heart sank, because I knew right then that she was gone.
Until she's found, we don't know anything. We don't know what to believe, what not to believe. We don't know if she's dead or alive until we have her body.
Sunday, July 11th, 2004 was not an easy day for 16-year-old Brittney Gregory. Her relationship with her 18-year-old boyfriend, John Fitzgerald, had been going through a rough patch lately. She spent the afternoon sleeping and watching TV, trying to distract herself, but it didn't help for very long. In the evening, Brittney had an intense argument with John over the phone. Frustrated and worried about her relationship, she finally gave in and decided to make up with John. That same evening, Brittney left to go meet John, but sadly, she never returned home. What could have happened to Brittney? Was she ever going to return home? Welcome to Mysterious 7, where we shed light on under-the-radar cases from across the country. Today, we'll be looking into the twisted case of the disappearance of a brilliant teenage girl named Brittney Gregory and uncovering the dark history of the people that surrounded her. Let's dive into the case. Brick Township is a township situated on the Jersey Shore within Ocean County in the U.S. state of New Jersey. It's one of the biggest townships among the ones the Jersey Shore harbors. Residents here often enjoy their weekends hanging out at the parks and beaches the town offers. It's also a huge attraction for the tourists who usually rent a bike here and take in the town's beauty. Brick Township was ranked as the second safest city in the United States after Newton, Massachusetts, but contradictorily, Brick Township also became the place where Brittney met her tragic end in 2004. Brittney May Gregory was born on April 1, 1988 in the town of Brick Township, Ocean County, New Jersey. Initially, she lived with her parents, Deborah Gregory and Joe Dunn. But when Brittney was only a toddler, her parents decided to separate. Brittney had a total of 4 siblings. She was the youngest amongst all of them and shared a special bond with each of them. Barbara Jo Dunn was her biological older sister. She and Brittney had an age gap of 3 years. Apart from Barbara, there was Brianna, William, and Brian Gregory, who were Brittney's half-siblings from her mother's side. By 2004, Brittney had grown up to be a clever and intelligent 16-year-old teenager. She had a set of blue eyes with her blonde hair hovering above them. There was always a smile on her face. Brittney loved going to school. She was a junior at Brick Memorial High School. As Brittney was an excellent student, her teachers had high hopes for her future. Brittney had a dream of studying crime scene evidence and becoming a forensic scientist so she could help solve crimes. When it came to TV shows, Brittney couldn't have enough of the ones on forensic crimes. And like any other teenager, Brittney had a keen interest in music as well. She idolized pop star Britney Spears and had stacks of her posters in her room. At the time in 2004, Brittney was also in a steady relationship with her 18-year-old boyfriend, John Fitzgerald. They'd met 2 years ago in 2002 at school. Those who knew Brittney described her as an easygoing girl who, even at the age of just 16 years, was quite mature for her age. Being the youngest one in her house, she was well loved and pampered by her family, friends, community, as well as her boyfriend John. According to Deborah, Brittney's mother, Brittney was spoiled by her family, but she was never vain or arrogant. On Sunday, July the 11th, 2004, 16-year-old Brittney was having a rough day. She and her boyfriend, 18-year-old John Fitzgerald, had been fighting a lot recently. It had started 2 days ago on the 9th when Brittney found out that John had been hanging out with another girl recently. Brittney had been dating John for almost 2 years now, and she was bothered by the fact that John was pulling away. Brittney was upset, and her mind was occupied with unpleasant thoughts. Brittney had gone to the hospital the previous day, on July 10, 2004, to visit her brother Brian's girlfriend, who had just had a baby. She returned home around 2 a.m. on Sunday, July 11, 2004, and went to sleep straight away. She woke up groggy around noon. Brittney's 19-year-old half-sister Brianna noticed that Brittney was not in her best mood. To keep her from thinking about John, Brianna asked Brittney if she'd like to go visit their older brother William, who was in a state prison at the time. awaiting trial on charges that he'd robbed a man after beating him with a tire iron. But Brittney didn't want to go and declined Brianna's offer. Brittney wanted to stay home and sleep. She also wanted to figure out what was going on with John. She finally gave up and called John over the phone. John told her that he was going to hang out at Point Pleasant Beach. Brittney wanted to go as well and asked John if he'd pick her up on the way. John refused, and Brittney hung up the call in frustration. That same evening, Brianna had gone to her brother Brian's house to babysit his kids, while Brittney was at her father, Mr. Dunn's place. Around 6:30 p.m., Brianna called Brittney to see how she was doing. Brittney told her that she'd been looking for a ride to go over to John's place. She wanted to meet him and sort things out. Brittney asked Brianna not to worry about her and to stay with the kids. She hung up, saying that she'd be back in a couple of hours. That Sunday night, Brittney did leave the house to go see John, but never came back home. The next day, on July 12, 2004, Brittney's father, Mr. Dunn, got worried when he couldn't find Brittney anywhere. He called up Brianna to ask if Brittney was with her or if she knew anything about where she could be. This made Brianna concerned as well, and she immediately went over to John's house and asked him if he'd met Brittney last night. John told her that she never came to visit him. On Monday, July 12, 2004, Brianna went to the local police station in Brick Township in the afternoon and reported her sister missing. That same day, by 4 p.m., detectives Mark Byrne and Elliot Morgan took charge of the case. The detectives arrived at Mr. Dunn's house, as that was the last place Brittney had been seen before she left. They started by questioning Brittney's family and her neighbors, but nobody could recall seeing her that previous night. After a thorough interrogation, the detectives ruled out the possibility of someone close to Brittney being involved in her disappearance. The detectives searched Brittney's house and found her cell phone, makeup, and her diary. To the detectives, Brittney's disappearance was starting to look more and more like an abduction. Brianna told the investigators about Brittney and John's bumpy relationship. When they heard about John's recent argument with Brittney, they called him over to the police station for questioning. John was a soft-spoken person. He told the detectives that he loved Brittney, and he himself was shocked upon hearing the news of her disappearance. John told the detectives that the last time he'd met Brittney was on July 10, 2004. As they'd been having troubles in their relationship, Brittney, in an attempt to calm things down, gave him a letter where she expressed how important their relationship was to her. She apologized for her behavior and even suggested that they could remain friends at the least. The last time John had spoken to Brittney was when they had the argument over the phone on July 11, 2004. He confirmed that they'd been fighting and that Brittney had hung up the phone when she got overly frustrated with him. John also told them that Brittney said she wasn't going to speak to him again. Since there wasn't any evidence against John yet, the detectives couldn't press charges. The police made John take a polygraph test, which he passed. Even though John was given a clean chit, he wasn't completely ruled out as a potential suspect. The police wanted to question Brittney's friends next. She had a very tight circle of friends who knew her and her family inside out. They told the detectives that Brittney's family had a history of drugs, and there were always strange people coming in and out of the house. The police found this information quite suspicious and went back to Brittney's family to learn more. A skim through Brittney's diary and an intense round of interrogation with her family uncovered a lot of the family's buried secrets. In 1989, when Brittney was only 8 months old, she was sent to live with her great-grandmother, Beatrice Wood. Mrs. Wood had taken custody of both Brittney and her sister Barbara Jo until their mother could straighten her life out. Brittney's parents, Deborah Gregory and Mr. Dunn, had never actually been married to each other. Deborah suffered from a drug problem for years, and that's why she separated from Brittney and Barbara Jo's father and gave their custody to Mrs. Wood. She even got herself enrolled in a Christian drug rehabilitation program in Florida, but dropped out after she started dating another resident in the program. Apart from Brittney and Barbara Jo, Deborah also had 3 other children with a man she was married to for several years who died in a car accident. Ocean County Family Court records showed that custody of Brittney and Barbara Jo had been changed 3 times in the 90s, until the 2 girls finally ended up with Mr. Dunn on December 3, 1997. Mr. Dunn had his own share of problems. He'd served 5 months in prison in 1991 for burglary and drug possession. He was arrested again on November 15, 2000 for cocaine possession and sentenced to probation. Mr. Dunn also had a long history of drug use. He had many shady associates and sketchy individuals were in and out of the house all the time. The police asked if any of those sketchy people had been to Mr. Dunn's house on the day Brittney went missing. Brittney's sister, Barbara Jo, gave the detectives a name. It was her ex-boyfriend, Tony. Barbara Jo said Tony was often too friendly with Brittney, and that became one of the main reasons why Barbara Jo broke up with him. When the police went to speak with Tony and questioned him of his whereabouts on the night of Brittney's disappearance, Tony gave them an alibi. He said he was at home with his new girlfriend at the time. Tony was not charged, but neither was he completely cleared as a suspect. There were various leads and tips, which only led to dead ends. The case stalled for days. The detectives were working hard to find her body and hopefully the truth behind her disappearance. Brittney's case had stunned the working-class Jersey Shore community. To show their love and support for Brittney, some neighbors formed their own search parties while others wore ribbons that said, "Find Brittney." By mid-July 2004, since there were no ransom calls or any other signs of Brittney, she was now presumed dead. But Brittney's case finally made some progress. An informant, who chose to remain unnamed, gave the detectives some information about a new suspect. The informant told the police about a man named Jack Fuller Jr., who was a 38-year-old known drug user with a criminal record, and also an associate of Brittney's dad, Mr. Dunn. The informant said that Jack had told him he hurt his back while digging up a grave to bury a girl he'd killed. After hearing of Brittney's disappearance on the news, the informant decided to come forward and speak up. They learned that Brittney knew Jack through his daughter, Cassandra. Cassandra Fuller had dated Brittney's brother, William, but their relationship had deteriorated after he went to prison. On one occasion, Cassandra Fuller and Brittney had found Jack passed out from a drug overdose. Brittney had cried looking at him. She had cared for him a little. After the informant's confession, the detectives were now on to Jack. They planned to get his confession on tape through a sting operation. On Friday, July 16, 2004, the informant made a plan to meet Jack at a convenience store. The detectives had the informant wear a wire while the police waited close by. New Jersey was a one-person consent state, meaning an individual was allowed to record the conversation they took part in without the other person's consent. Sadly, Jack didn't reveal any information about Brittney or the location of where he killed her, but he did say he wanted to kill someone else, a man named Tommy. Jack mentioned that Tommy was there that night when Brittney was looking for a ride to John's place. He was the last person to see Brittney alive. The Tommy that Jack was talking about was Jack's childhood friend, Tommy Long. He was another career criminal. Jack actually had plans to go over to Tommy's house after meeting with the informant. The police managed to reach Tommy's house before Jack did and set up surveillance there. Shortly after, the detectives found Jack's car abandoned near Tommy's house, but Jack appeared a few minutes later with a gas can. Jack was arrested on suspicion of Brittney's murder and brought into the police station for questioning. Tommy Long was brought in for an interrogation as well. At first, Tommy resisted and was reluctant to speak about Jack. But that was until the police played Jack's conversation with the informant and revealed to him how Jack was planning to take him out. Upon listening to Jack's conversation, Tommy told the police everything he knew. He said that he and Jack were driving around on July 11, 2004 and decided to go to Mr. Dunn's. A few minutes later, when they were leaving, Jack told Tommy that he was going to drop him off. But before they could leave, Brittney got into Jack's car as well and asked if they could drop her at her boyfriend John's house. A little while later, Jack dropped Tommy off at his house and then went with Brittney to drop her to her boyfriend's place as she'd requested. Tommy claimed that it was then that Jack must have killed the girl. Jack was confronted with this information, but he said that he didn't know what they were talking about. He denied having any involvement in Brittney's disappearance and asked for an attorney. While the police were trying to get Jack to confess, another witness came forward. A woman called up the police and told them that Jack had abducted her some time ago. She claimed to know where Jack most likely took Brittney. The woman was a drug addict, and Jack had promised her a supply of drugs. Little did she know that it was all a trap. The woman said Jack held her hostage for a few months, but somehow she managed to escape. The woman told the detectives about a spot in the Greenville section of Lakewood, New Jersey, where Jack liked to go and get high. The place was less than 2 miles away from Jack's home. On Tuesday, July 27, 2004, almost 2 weeks after Brittney's disappearance, the police had a search team go out into the area the woman had described. This area had already been searched by some crews, helicopters, and dogs the previous week, but nothing was discovered. This tip from the woman was the detectives' last hope of solving Brittney's case. If whatever the woman claimed turned out to be false, they'd be back to square one. Detectives Mark Byrne and Elliot Morgan believed that a fresh set of eyes was required for this search, and so members from the state police and other neighboring police departments and search dogs were all brought in to investigate the scene. Some of the officers had been on their day off, but had asked permission to continue the search and bring their dogs along with them. When one searcher found an area in the woods with an arm sticking out, he alerted the other team members.
It was just hundreds of law enforcement officers searching multiple locations. We had airplanes from the FBI, we had Coast Guard helicopters. We had whatever we needed that we thought was going to help find her.
At around 9 a.m., Brittney's unclothed body was discovered. There was a necklace around the neck with Brittney's name on it, which helped confirm her identity. Brittney's grief-stricken family received the numbing news of her body's discovery at around 1 p.m. that same day.
Until she's found, we don't know anything. We don't know what to believe, what not to believe. We don't know if she's dead or alive until we have her body.
The family remained in Mr. Dunn's home for hours, consoling each other while struggling to come to grips with the terrible news. One of Brittney's aunts, Susan Wood, was the only relative who attended the afternoon news conference on the day of the gruesome discovery. She wept softly upon hearing details of the scene and was too disturbed to speak to any reporters afterwards. But before she left, she stopped to tightly hug the officers who found Brittney's body before managing to whisper her thanks. The officers refused to say whether the girl's body had been clothed when found or whether it bore any signs of trauma or assault. They stated that it was too early to determine Brittney's cause of death and where she died. A funeral was organized and Brittney was laid to rest in Forest Green Park Cemetery, Morganville, Monmouth County, New Jersey. While investigating the case further to confirm Jack's involvement in Brittney's murder, the detectives found out that Jack's car, a town Chevy Cavalier, had been spotted by an officer at the crime scene around the time of Brittney's disappearance. When the officer approached Jack to ask him what he was doing in the area, he told the officer that his dog had gone missing and he was looking for him. Jack wasn't questioned any further and was let go. Jack's car was sent in for a closer inspection and traces of blood were found inside. When a sample of that blood was tested against Brittney, it came back as a match. This, along with the witnesses and Jack's voice recordings on the tape, was enough evidence to arrest Jack. In 2004, Jack Fuller Jr. of Howell was charged with the first-degree murder of Brittney May Gregory and booked into the Ocean County Jail, where he was held on a $1 million bond. Even then, he maintained his innocence and denied having anything to do with Brittney's murder. More than a year later, on Tuesday, October 18, 2005, Jack pleaded guilty to murdering Brittney on the night of July 11, 2004. Jack stated that he punched Brittney at least twice in the face and head because she tried to stop him from smoking crack while he was giving her a ride to her boyfriend's house. After the beating, Brittney began making choking and gurgling sounds. As blood dripped from her nose and mouth, Jack continued to get high. By the time he paid any attention to Brittney, she had stopped breathing. On Friday, January 13, 2006, 40-year-old Jack walked into Judge Vincent J. Grasso's Toms River courtroom for sentencing. With a shaved head, goatee, and multiple tattoos on his body, Jack kept a straight face throughout the hearing. When asked if he'd like to address the court before Grasso handed down his sentence, Jack simply replied, "No, sir." Jack's attorney, John Goins, did not say anything either in Jack's defense. Instead, he asked Grasso to just sentence his client. Judge Grasso sentenced Jack to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of 16-year-old Brittney Gregory. Brittney's family and friends filled 3 rows of seats behind Jack. Deborah Gregory, Brittney's mother, was the only member of the victim's family to address the court. She said that Brittney's family didn't believe Jack was telling the whole truth about her daughter's murder. She questioned why Fuller took Brittney, why he let her die instead of taking her to a hospital, why he took her clothes off before he buried her, and why he chose not to tell the police where he buried her body. Deborah further said that losing her daughter was a heart-wrenching feeling, and there were still so many unanswered questions. She believed that the truth of Brittney's death would die with Jack. Deborah even wore a ring that Brittney was wearing on her finger when her body was discovered. It bore shovel marks. Calling Brittney her little angel, Deborah Gregory said her daughter died for something she so strongly believed in, her abhorrence for drugs. Deborah's final words addressing the court were, "He's escaping life in prison, but he won't be escaping his own lie. God will have his day with him." Adding on to Jack's sentence, Grasso gave Jack 5 years of parole for aggravating factors should Jack live to be 70 years old, which was the age he'd be upon his release. In 2008, Brick Memorial High School, where Brittney went to school, started a forensics program in memory of Brittney. John said he felt guilty that he didn't drive back to pick up Brittney when she called. They were in love, and Brittney had even asked him to marry her when she turned 18. She wanted to raise a family with him. Mrs. Wood, Brittney's great-grandmother, said that Brittney never seemed tempted by drugs herself. She didn't go out much. Instead, she stayed in and did her homework. Mrs. Wood said that Brittney had planned to visit her in Las Vegas in August 2004. Before the tragic incident, Brittney had written a letter to Mrs. Wood thanking her for sending $25 for her prom. She also stated that she missed and loved her and would visit soon. While her loved ones would never be able to fully be whole again after her loss, they were given some small form of peace, knowing that the man responsible for her death was now facing the consequences. Do you think that Jack Fuller Jr. told the whole truth about the crime he committed? Or do you feel that the authorities chose to hide some sensitive information from Brittney's family about her murder? Let us know your thoughts about this case. Also, we'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to share your suggestions in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Cape Town police are reporting the disappearance of a newborn baby from the city's famous Groote Hospital.
Ek weet wat jou naam is, maar vrouwen net mooi bring die baba terug, ons sal niks doen nie.